Empress Lysera rose from her throne of woven star steel, her iridescent scales shimmering under the vaulted dome's auroral lights, and fixed her gaze on the Terran envoy. The Celent Empire cedes no sovereignty over the fuel lattice without ironclad assurances, she declared, her voice a resonant cascade that silenced the assembled counselors. My hereditary mandate, forged in the blood of Thalcor progenitors, and the unyielding might of our imperial armada demand it. The envoy, a wiry human named Delegate Voss with skin the dull beige of unrefined alloy, inclined his head in that peculiar primate gesture of deference. His translator orb hummed faintly, rendering his words into the lilting harmonics of Celent high formal. Your Radiance, the Terran Coalition, honors the terms. Control of the lattice nodes remains yours, secured by mutual patrols and shared yields. But the treaty requires a guarantor, a protective attaché for Princess Ellen, symbol of our bonded fates. Lysera's crest flared subtly, a ripple of violet along her neck frills betraying the calculation beneath her composure. The fuel lattice spanned the Empire's core worlds, its quantum veins pulsing with the hypermatter that fueled armada drives and civilian spires alike. Yielding even fractional oversight to these upstart humans risked fracture lines in her rule, especially with conservative factions whispering of ancestral dilution. Yet the Coalition's censor nets had proven prescient against Krell marauder incursions. Pragmatism demanded alliance. She gestured to the chamber's shadowed archway. Then present this symbol. Let the council witness. Flanked by 2 Celent honor guards, their spear tips humming with containment fields, the human attaché stepped forward. Narine Krev moved with the unhurried grace of one accustomed to scrutiny, his compact frame clad in the Coalition's matte black duty armor, unmarked by ornament, no taller than a Celent subadult. His features were blunt, dark eyes steady under cropped hair, jaw set in quiet resolve. He halted precisely at the protocol demarcation line, 10 paces from the throne dais, and saluted with a closed fist to chest. Empress Lysera, I am Narine Krev, assigned as protective attaché to Princess Ellen. My duty is her safety. Per Treaty Clause 7.2, murmurs rippled through the council tiers, crystalline robes rustling like wind through lattice vines. Lysera assessed him coolly, her multifaceted eyes tracing the human's form. Primitive physiology, they said. Fragile bones, inefficient thermoregulation, no natural energy reticulation. What peril could such a creature guard against that her armada could not preempt? Your role as ceremonial attaché Krev, she pronounced, her tone laced with imperial finality. You will shadow the princess in public forums only. Protocols are absolute. No unsanctioned access to inner wards, no communion with lattice controls, no discourse beyond mandated pleasantries. Humans bring vigor to the bargaining table, but imperial competence guards our hearths. Krev's expression remained impassive, a mask of professional neutrality. From Lysera's vantage, she noted the subtle shift in his posture, not defiance, but acknowledgement, like a shield settling into hold. Understood, Your Radiance, he replied evenly, voice carrying through the translator without inflections waver. Duty accepts the bounds. For the princess's security, however, I formally request inspection access to palace defenses, perimeter scans, ward schematics, guard rotations, standard protocol for any attaché posting. The chamber erupted in a cascade of chimes and hisses, councillors' frills pulsing in agitation. Lord Varak Thal, elder of the Conservative Synod, uncoiled from his perch with deliberate menace, his scales etched in archaic gold filigree. Blasphemy veiled as protocol, he thundered, mandibles clicking sharply. Ancient Xenic statutes, codified in the Third Reckoning, bar off-world chattel from inner sanctums. This primate's tread profanes Thalcor soil. Expel him, Radiance, or the Synod withholds ratification. The lattice yields will curdle untended, and our armada starves. Lysera's frills stiffened to crimson, the air thickening with her reticulated pheromones, a subtle command haze that quelled lesser tempers. Varak's ploy was transparent. The Synod clung to purity edicts like molting relics, fearing any alien foothold eroded hereditary might. Delay ratification, and Krell raiders would feast on unsecured nodes. The Empire's stability hinged on this treaty's ink drying before the next cycle, yet yielding fully invited Synod ascendancy, fracturing her pragmatic block. Her gaze flicked to Krev, who stood unmoving, eyes scanning the chamber's heights with clinical detachment. Assessing sightlines, she surmised, as if palace stone held secrets her engineers overlooked. Enough, Lysera commanded, her voice slicing the din like a plasma edge. "The statutes bind Xenic invaders, not treaty guarantors. Expulsion is denied." Varak's mandibles parted in shock, but she pressed on, turning to the human. "Attaché Krev, you are granted temporary inner ward access for security sweeps, escorted, logged, and revoked at my discretion. Prove your symbol's worth, or protocols tighten to suffocation." Krev dipped his head once. "Gratitude, your radiance. Sweeps commence at your convenience." No triumph in his tone, only the quiet resolve of one folding orders into action. As honor guards moved to flank him, Lysera caught the faintest quirk at his mouth's corner. Amusement? Or mere muscle twitch? Intriguing. This human's restraint amid the storm. The council dispersed in eddies of grudging murmurs. Varak's glare promising reprisals. Lysera descended the dais, her robes whispering over polished hypercrystal, and signaled Princess Ellen from the side alcove. The young heir emerged, her scales a softer azure, crest hooded in adolescent reserve. "Mother," Ellen murmured, glancing warily at the human. "Must I endure this attachment? Endure and observe?" Lysera replied softly, guiding her daughter forward. Proximity to the attaché would test the treaty's mettle, and her own. Krev knelt fluidly to Ellen's level, extending a gauntleted hand palm up in neutral offer, not touch. "Princess, honored to serve. Any concerns, voice them. My watch begins now." Ellen hesitated, her frills flickering uncertainty. But Lysera noted the human's patience. No pressure, no presumption. As they departed the chamber toward the inner wards, Varak's faction lingered in shadowed niches, their pheromones sour with plots. Lysera's mind raced through contingencies, lattice patrols reinforced, synod bribes traced, Krell vectors mapped. This human's sweeps might reveal overlooked vulnerabilities or fabricate them for coalition gain. Yet in his steady gaze she glimpsed no guile, only duty's quiet forge. In the antechamber, as engineers unspooled ward schematics for Krev's perusal, Lysera watched him interface with the hollow display. His fingers danced across alien glyphs with startling fluency, translator aiding but not dictating. He queried patrol overlaps, flagged a resonator blind spot in under a cycle. Her chief engineer, Thalira, vented surprise through quivering vents. He adapts the matrix intuitively. Our novices take spans. Lysera's crest eased fractionally. Symbolic indeed, but utility lurked beneath. As Krev traced a potential breach vector, murmuring tactical adjustments to the guards, she felt the first crack in formality's armor. Not inferiority, this human, but difference. Potent, perhaps. The treaty-bound worlds, now proximity-bound fates. Varak's expulsion bid had forced her hand, but in granting access she claimed control. Or so she told herself, ignoring the intrigue stirring in her core. Hours blurred into the sweep's rhythm. Krev multitasked seamlessly, scanning bulkheads while briefing Ellen on evasion drills, his voice calm amid the clatter of diagnostic probes. Ellen, once skittish, leaned in, frills perking at his improvised shadow game for threat spotting. Lysera observed from the overlook, her political calculus shifting. The synod plotted, enemies circled, but this alliance's guarantor moved with the endurance of unyielding stone. What other ceremonial depths hid in human form, as twilight auroras bled through viewports? Krev concluded the initial pass. Wards secure, your radiance, with 3 optimizations proposed. Lattice nexus clear. He saluted, sweat beading his brow. Exertion her guards would have signaled fatigue from cycles prior, yet his optimism held, grounded in facts. Lysera nodded, propriety veiling her intrigue. Implement them, and attaché, stand vigilant. Worlds watch. In that enforced nearness, the first threads of partnership wove, fragile yet unyielding. Lysera's throne room thrummed with the low hum of assembled courtiers, their iridescent robes whispering like distant storms as Naren Krev stepped into the central dais. The human attaché moved without flourish, his posture rigid yet fluid, executing the required Selenth salute, a complex weave of arm arcs and knee bends that honored the Imperial Armada's ancient vector formations. She observed from her elevated seat, chin lifted in cool formality, her violet eyes unyielding. Protocol demanded perfection. Anything less would signal weakness to the watching holograms relaying to the fleet lords. Nareen completed the sequence flawlessly, his breath steady, not a tremor betraying fatigue after the prior day's transit exertions. The court murmured approval, but Lysera raised a single jeweled hand, silencing them. Adequate, Atash. You grasp our forms. Stand at Princess Ellen's flank henceforth. Her voice carried the weight of worlds, distant as starlight, enforcing the barrier of rank. He inclined his head, expression neutral, humble duty incarnate, no boast in his gaze. She noted it absently, already turning to the next petition, propriety her unbreachable shield. The scheduled inspection of the palace lattice followed 2 cycles later, a road affair amid the gleaming conduits that pulsed ethereal blue energy through the spires. Lysera accompanied the engineering cadre out of calculated oversight, her presence a subtle reminder of vigilance. Narration trailed as protocol shadow, his Terran uniform stark against the sullen silks. As the group traced the lower galleries, a faint harmonic whine escaped a junction seal. Subtle, dismissible to her trained ear, Narration halted, eyes narrowing on the lattice weave. Empress, that conduit. Resonance mismatch at the tertiary node. Pressure bleed will cascade if unsealed. He knelt without leave, fingers tracing the filigree without touching, sketching a quick diagram on his wrist pad. Standard patch, risks thermal backlash, but reroute the flux via a counter-spiral gasket, improvised from spare insulator weave. It equalizes without full depressurization. The lead engineer, Varak, scoffed through his translator implant. Human heuristics, our matrices are calibrated for precision, not improvisation. Lysera arched a brow ridge, her advisors exchanging glances, yet curiosity pricked her veil of detachment. Proceed, attaché, demonstrate. With efficient motions, Narration harvested a filament from a redundant panel, material Cellant doctrine deemed ornamental, and twisted it into a helical seal, multitasking diagnostics on his pad while calibrating the flow. The whine faded to silence, indicators steadying green. Varak probed the node, mandibles clicking in reluctant awe. Flux stabilized, 80% efficiency retained. Luck aligns with vigilance, Lysera intoned. Her tone crisp as cryosteel, she dismissed the anomaly inwardly. Coincidence, not mastery. Humans bartered competence for spectacle. This proved little. Record it. Resume circuit. In the shadowed alcoves of the High Council chamber that evening, Prince Arvek's voice cut through the holographic star maps like a cloaked dagger. Lysera presided from the head dais, her fingers steepled as he paced, his faction's loyalists arrayed behind. The Terran treaty phrase our sovereignty, Imperial Mother, Princess Ellen's guarantor, a soft-skinned outsider, mocks our bloodlines. Propose instead the dynastic union with House Vren. Armada reinforcements, no foreign strings. The fleet lords murmur, succession demands purity. Counselors shifted, eyes flicking to Lysera. Arvek's ambition gleamed, his flaw ever the haste that blinded him to deeper currents. Yet his words stirred the old rivalries, pitting imperial stability against his bid for influence. She quelled the ripple, with a measured gaze. The coalition's fleets counter the Krell incursion. Dynastic whims yield to necessity. Table it. But his lobbying seeded doubt, optics fracturing under the treaty's weight. Dawn's third cycle brought the intelligence sweep's grim yield. A holographic dossier materialized in Lysera's private sanctum. Anti-Terran saboteurs arming the lower wards, crude charges seated near Ellen's quarters. Fractured optics threatened. Ellen slain. The treaty dissolves in scandal. Arvek's faction hovered in suspicion, their rhetoric too pointed. Lysera's cores tightened. Personal ties be damned, stability demanded action. Attaché Krev, she summoned via comm, voice framed as routine. Join me for ward patrol. Verify lattice integrity post-repair. No mention of threats. Test his metal under guise. Narration arrived promptly. Gear understated, multi-tool, scanner, no excess. They descended into the dim underworlds together, her guards at discreet distance. The air grew thick with recycler's tang. Shadows pooling in service shafts. Lysera's senses sharpened, every echo a potential betrayal. Her propriety cracking just enough to admit the human's nearness. Professional, yet inescapably intimate in the confined gloom. A faint click echoed ahead. Narration froze, hand raised. Empress, tethered charge, magnetic anchor. Saboteur work. He dropped to a crouch, scanner humming as he multitasked, mapping the device's yield pattern while isolating the trigger lattice. Lysera's guards tensed, plasma lances priming, but she signaled hold, watch. Sweat beaded his brow, endurance uncomplaining amid the ward's stifling heat. but his hand stayed steady. Det cord variant, linked to seismic proxy. Standard diffuse risks sympathetic chain. Pattern clicked in his eyes. He jury-rigged a micropulse from his tool's emitter, syncing it to the tether's frequency. A soft pop, then silence. The charge slumped inert. He extracted a data shard from its core, interfacing swiftly. Logs traced to Arvex auxiliary comms, faction watermark, undisguised. Lysera's breath caught, mandibles parting fractionally in unbidden surprise. Verax scans. The quartz murmurs. Luck? No. This human wove disparate threads, conduit flaw to sabotage weave. With an adaptability her engineer's rote-bound minds circled slowly. He rose, wiping residue, expression unchanged. Duty done, no triumph proclaimed. She met his gaze, the enforced nearness now charged. Evidence secured. Arvex folly exposed. Propriety held, but intrigue fractured it. Strength yielding not to weakness, but to unforeseen alliance. Your vigilance proves more than form. Worlds watched indeed. Partnership's threads thickened, unyielding as imperial steel. Arvex's hologram flickered in her mind's eye, his lobbying a crumbling scaffold. Naryn handed her the shard, fingers brushing hers. A fleeting contact. Electric with implication. Routine inspection? No. Skills forge. Tempering doubt into respect. Lysera's gaze hardened on the crystalline shard in her palm, its faint glow etching Arvex's duplicity into irrefutable light. She rose from the shadowed alcove, imperial robes whispering against the marble, and activated her comm sphere with a decisive flick. Summon Naryn Krev to the inner sanctum. Discreetly. And prepare a writ of palace immunity, full operational latitude. The human arrived within moments, his stride measured, eyes scanning the chamber's vaulted arches as if mapping escape vectors amid the gilded splendor. No deference in his posture, only quiet readiness. A trait that irked her still, yet now stirred something sharper. Utility. She extended the shard. This anomaly demands excavation. Arvex's web extends beyond court whispers.
Commission you to lead a confidential inquiry. Your team, your methods, under my immunity.
Uncover the roots, Naryn Krev, but leave no imperial fingerprints. His nod was immediate, fingers brushing the shard from hers again. This time with purpose, not accident. Parameters, depth of access, total, palace archives, secure relays, even off-world proxies if they link back. Report only to me. She watched him pocket it, already mentally dissecting logistics. Humans moved like that, not with the ponderous calculus of Selenth tacticians, but a fluid cascade of contingencies. Dismissible, once. Now, indispensable? Naryn departed without flourish, vanishing into the palace's labyrinthine veins. Lysera turned to her reflection in the polished obsidian wall, steeling against the fracture in her propriety. Stability first, personal tremors later. By dawn's veiled light, Naryn had assembled his cadre. 2 Selenth shadows from her own guard, loyal but rigid in protocol, and a Terran tech specialist, Mira Voss, borrowed from the Coalition embassy. They slipped into the Undercroft archives under immunity guise, bypassing wards with Naryn's improvised bypass, a jury-rigged harmonic key synced to palace frequencies, pieced from a comm unit and shard harmonics. The Selenth guard stiffened at the hack's audacity, unorthodox. One muttered, crest frills quivering. Regulation demands, results demand adaptation. Naryn replied evenly, threading the device into the lock. It hummed open. Inside, data vaults loomed like ancient monoliths, encrypted in layered Selenth ciphers that had thwarted Imperial auditors for cycles. Mira cracked the outer shell with brute force algorithms, but the core resisted, nested veils shifting like living sand. Naryn leaned in, eyes flicking between readouts, cross-referencing patterns from the shard's signature. There! Repeating fractal echo. Matches Arvex's lobby pulse, but inverted, for an overlay. His fingers danced across dual interfaces, one decrypting, the other mirroring Mira's feed while he vocalized contingencies to the guards. Flank the auxiliary node. If it trips, we pivot to proxy trace. The Selenth exchanged glances, frill crests flattening in unease. Humans juggled threads like breathing. Selenth minds excelled at singular depth, not this relentless parallelism. Minutes bled into hours, Naryn foregoing rest, sweat beading on his brow as he chained breaches. A breakthrough. Encrypted missives bloomed, stamped with the Vorath Concord's sigil. Funds funneled through shadow accounts, arming Arvek's faction against the Terran Treaty. War in Empire's hand, Naren said, voice steady despite the strain. Vorath, their buying collapse. Mira exhaled sharply. How'd you spot the inversion so fast? Our Sims projected days, pattern bleed. Seen it in oplogs. He didn't elaborate, already compressing files for Lysara. The guards nodded, subtle awe rippling their scales. Humans, persisting through fatigue where Selenth would cycle shifts. Lysara received the dossier in her private eyrie, the Vorath seal igniting cold fury, proof enough to gut Arvek's core. But timing mattered. Public procession loomed, Princess Helen's ceremonial escort through the capital spires. A treaty showcase. Lysara would attend, flanked by honor guard. Risky, with shadows stirring, yet visibility bound the alliance tighter. The procession unfurled amid thrumming crowds, crystal avenues alive with hovering banners and choral drones. Lysara glided at the fore atop her palanquin, Ellen beside her. Slender, wide-eyed, the treaty's living emblem. Naren shadowed them on foot, unarmored per custom, yet his presence drew murmurs. Alien brute amid Selenth grace. Halfway through the grand concourse, chaos erupted. A street performer, cloaked in iridescent rags, lunged from the throng, vibro dagger whipping free, trajectory locked on Ellen. The crowd's roar drowned the guards' alarms, blades clashed in the crush. Nareen surged forward, body intercepting like a living shield. The assassin's strike grazed his shoulder, parting synth-weave uniform, but he twisted mid-motion, armbar locking the attacker's wrist, free hand snatching a fallen guard's stun rod. One pivot, and the foe crumpled, dagger skittering. Naren didn't stop. He scooped Ellen behind him, pivoting to cover Lysara as secondary threats peeled from the crowd. Two more disguised, blades gleaming. He met the first with a brutal elbow shunt, multitasking shield for the princess while barking coordinates to guards. Flank left, aerial drone sweep. The second assailant slashed high. Naren ducked, rolled and rose, driving the rod into a nerve cluster. Precise, economical. Blood slicked his arm, yet he pressed, forming a human bulwark until Selenth reinforcements sealed the ring. Lysara's heart thundered beneath her regal mask, hand instinctively gripping Ellen's as Naren stood bloodied but unbowed, scanning for more. The human had shielded them both. Not protocol, instinct. Her person, unbidden. The crowd's shock morphed to cheers, but undercurrents churned. Back in the palace, Lysara issued edicts from the throne dais, voice resonant through holocasts galaxy-wide. Arvek's advisors, public arrest, custody under imperial justice. No summary blades, the law shall carve truth. Her choice was deliberate. Executions would taint the treaty, invite Vorath mockery. Process preserved legitimacy, even if it galled her instinct for swift excision. Court erupted in the aftermath chamber. Factions splintered like fractured crystal. Arvek's loyalists decried the human as foreign venom, poisoning our veins, while moderates hailed Naren. The off-worlder turned blade-aside doom. Whispers of Vorath gold fueled the divide, poles fracturing imperial unity. Lysara surveyed the holographic sentiment maps, crests tight with strain. Stability teetered. She could not let alien bias unravel her gambit. Rising, she activated the central emitter. Naren Krev's vigilance preserved my heir and my person. His service merits acknowledgement. The Empire records its debt. Gasps rippled, unprecedented, an empress naming a human so publicly. Arvek's remnants seethed, but the moderates swelled, respect edging into the discourse. Lysara felt the propriety crack further, not weakness but calculated bridge building. Nareen's competence demanded it, yet tests lingered. The High Council convened at dusk, a viper's nest of adjudication. Lysara summoned Nareen to the antechamber. Testify before them. Under palace aegis, no harm befalls you. Speak your findings. Let the court weigh the Vorath shadow. He met her eyes, blood scrubbed but shoulder bandaged, fatigue a mere shadow on his frame. Risky for you. They'll twist it. Risk defines rule. A pause, her voice softening fractionally. You've earned the platform. Prove them wrong. Nareen inclined his head, stepping toward the council vault. Lysara watched him go, the brush of earlier fingers echoing, an electric thread weaving doubt into alliance. Assassins revealed the fragile line. Between crown and collapse stood this human, ordinary in his eyes, extraordinary indeed. Her empire needed such anomalies now. And perhaps, she admitted in the quiet, she did too. Senator Varek's voice sliced through the vaulted chamber like a ceremonial blade, his elongated fingers unrolling a brittle scroll etched with glyphs older than the Empire's stars. By the Edict of HFY War, interspecies taboos unbroken since the fracturing wars, I move for the immediate exile of the human Naran Krev. His presence profanes the throne's sanctity, inviting divine censure upon our treaty with the Terran Coalition. The ancestors demand purity. Lysera's throne loomed at the chamber's apex, its crystalline facets refracting the senator's agitated faces into fractured warnings. She felt the weight of their stares, 24 nobles, their neural crests flickering in shades of dissent, probing for weakness in this fragile pivot toward alliance. Naran stood at her right, posture unyielding, his dark eyes scanning the vault's shadowed alcoves. The echo of their earlier touch lingered on her skin, a human warmth that both steadied and unsettled her. Murmurs rippled outward, crests pulsing crimson with approval from the hardliners. Varak, gaunt and resolute, his motivation rooted in ancestral piety masking a bid for factional dominance, pressed forward. Empress, the treaty's legitimacy crumbles under this blasphemy. Religious edicts supersede even your prerogative. Exile him, or face the Synod's wrath and the Armada's fracture. Lysera's fingers tightened on the throne's arms, her voice emerging as tempered steel. The Edict of HFY War, Senator. Recite its precise clause, that we may all bask in its unassailable clarity. She would not yield ground lightly. Her flaw lay in that unyielding grip on control, even as doubt whispered of broader horizons. Varak's crest flared triumphantly. Clause 7, no off-world flesh shall stand within the sovereign's shadow, lest the bloodlines mingle and the stars weep. Forensic precedent from the Third Synod. Naran stepped forward, his movements fluid, unhurried, as if addressing a routine briefing rather than an imperial tribunal. From her vantage, Lysera noted the subtle shift in his stance. Weight balanced, hands loose, human adaptability manifesting in this alien arena. He activated a compact hollow projector from his wrist cuff, its beam piercing the air with crystalline precision. With respect, Senator, your scroll cites HFY War 7 but omits the contextual amendments of the Reconciliation Accord, Cycle 47. Allow me to illuminate. The projection bloomed. Layered schematics of ancient texts, cross-referenced with galactic legal matrices, timelines branching like neural webs. Naran's voice remained even, patient, as he multitasked through the display. Zooming clauses, overlaying linguistic evolutions, correlating Selenth glyphs with Terran forensic linguistics he'd evidently mastered en route. The off-world flesh prohibition targeted bioengineered invaders during the fracturing, not diplomatic envoys. Precedent. Your own synod waived it for the Krell Alliance in 312. Here's the verbatim waiver. Neural stamped by Archon Lyrith. Senators leaned forward, crests dimming from scarlet to amber confusion. Varak's mandibles clicked in protest. Irrelevant. The spirit corroborated by pattern analysis. Naran flicked the projection to a security matrix, a dynamic web of palace threat vectors, infiltration probabilities and sabotaged nodes he'd woven from intercepted noble comms and Armada logs. Lysera glimpsed her own overlooked vulnerabilities rendered in stark efficiency. Blind spots in the vault's vents, agitation hotspots among the faction lords. Exile me. And this matrix predicts a 73% spike in assassination risks within 48 cycles. Your motion doesn't preserve purity. It invites collapse. The chamber hushed, Varak's crest wilting as he scanned the data, his pious facade cracking under the human's relentless logic. Lysera suppressed a flicker of surprise. This was no rote recitation but creative synthesis, connecting dusty edicts to live threats aliens like Varak approached through ritual alone. Naran's humility shone in his delivery, facts offered, not flaunted. Yet the senator's reactions betrayed growing awe, whispers of, how did he compile this so swiftly, threading the air? Before Varak could rally, chaos erupted. A shadow detached from the vault's upper grate. A cloaked figure, neural dampener humming faintly, blade arcing toward Lysera's throat in a blur of monomolecular edge. The assassin's crest was masked, but the strike screamed noble desperation, aimed to shatter the treaty in blood. Naran moved like liquid resolve. He interposed without a sound, his body twisting into the path. the blade scoring deep across his ribs in a spray of human blood that sizzled on the crystalline floor. Momentum carried him into the assassin, forearm slamming the intruder's wrist with precision-born force, disarming and pinning in a single fluid lock. Guards swarmed, but Narn held position, breath ragged, yet eyes locked on Lysera. Protective, unblinking, until the threat crumpled. He slumped then, blood pooling, but waved off the nearest medic with a gritted directive. Secure the vault first. Perimeter breach confirmed. Eastern wing. His endurance defied Cellant physiology. Where her kind would convulse from such trauma, this human endured, multitasking pain with command. Lysera rose, throne forgotten, her heart pounding against imperial decorum. Assassins had breached her sanctum before, but none thwarted so cleanly. Medics to the human. Now, throne's prerogative invokes temporary immunity for Narn Krev. The motion to exile is overruled. His bloodstains are floor in service, not sacrilege. Varrock sputtered, but the chamber's momentum had shifted, crests glowing with reluctant respect. Lysera seized it, her voice booming through amplified authority. Senators, the Matrix speaks truth. I call an immediate vote. Expand Joint Command under centralized security protocols. Those who agitate in shadows forfeit voice and light. The vote cascaded swiftly. A's dominating as nobles, chastened by the near catastrophe, glimpsed the human's value. Varrock's faction crumbled, their agitation clamped by the decree's iron weight. Lysera felt the propriety crack further. This was no mere alliance but a forge, human ingenuity tempering her steel. As medics stabilized Narn, his wound sealed with imperial nanites under public gaze, a deliberate show of favor, she descended the throne dais. Up close, his face was pale but composed, optimism unbroken despite the gash. You overstepped protocol, she murmured, propriety fraying into personal concern, her fingers brushing his arm in echo of before. Protocol adapts, Empress. His faint smile bridged the gap, pack-bonding instinct weaving trust across species. Lysera nodded, turning to the chamber. Narn Krev is authorized to oversee palace security overhaul. His methods, tactical superiority acknowledged, will integrate with our armada. Dissent noted, but obedience required. Senators bowed, Varrock's crest subdued. As attendants wheeled Narn toward recovery bays, Lysera watched, the electric thread tightening into Alliance's core. An old law invoked, a ruler's prerogative rewritten, the human's ordinary resolve rewriting her empire's script. Whispers followed, research queries into Terran resilience already pinging synod nets, aliens probing the anomaly that saved her throne. In the quiet aftermath, she admitted the truth. Her empire, and she, needed this human's quiet extraordinary. And as his eyes met hers one last time before the doors sealed, hope burned brighter, forged in shared peril. Lysera's throne chamber thrummed with the low chime of an incoming priority transmission, its imperial seal fracturing the air like a blade through silk. She straightened, her crest flaring subtly against the weight of assembled advisors, as the holographic envoy from the sanctioning Concord materialized, stern, unyielding, its scaled features etched with feigned regret. Empress Lysera Thal Kor, it intoned, voice a resonant grind. The Concord hereby imposes full economic strictures on your trade lanes. Your treaty with the Terran upstarts destabilizes the core worlds. Cease it, or face our proxy enforcers already mobilizing at Grid Epsilon. 7. Murmurs rippled through the chamber, Varrock's crest twitching with barely veiled triumph. Lysera's gaze hardened, her fingers tightening on the armrests carved from ancestral void steel. Stability was her creed, her bloodline's unyielding charge, yet this human interloper had just rewritten her peril into victory. She would not yield now. Transmit your terms formally, she commanded, her tone silk over steel. The Falcor throne answers no ultimatums. As the hologram dissolved, Narn Krev was already striding through the recovery bay doors, med pods hissing shut behind him. His wounds, mere hours old, itched under fresh seals, but pain was an old companion, shrugged off like yesterday's orders. He waved off the Cellant medics clustering with their probing scanners, their bioluminescent veins pulsing in confusion. Humans healed fast enough. Complaints served no purpose. Spotting a palace schematic on a nearby console, his mind raced ahead, pattern recognition snapping disparate threads together. The Empire's vaunted feed lines, those nutrient conduits threading every bulkhead, laced with conductive polymers for emergency power reroute. Primitive by Terran field standards, he tapped the console, pulling up defense overlays. Your Majesty, he said into the open comm, voice steady as he patched through to the throne chamber. Narine Krev. Those feed lines. Reroute them as improvised shock grids. Prime them with overcharged pulses from the auxiliary reactors. Any borders breaching a bay trigger a cascade. Non-lethal to Selenth physiology. But it'll fry unshielded exosuits cold. Human breaching tactic. Old Spec Ops trick from our wet navies. Integrates clean with your systems. Lysera's advisors recoiled, crests flattening in alarm. Outrageous, Barak hissed, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. This repurposing invites escalation. The Concord will brand it provocation, fracture our neutrals. She silenced him with a raised hand, the chamber falling mute as Narin's schematic bloomed before them. Elegant, ruthless, born of battlefield grit. The human's voice carried no boast, only quiet certainty, as if such ingenuity were Tuesday's labor. Her pulse quickened. This was no ceremonial shade, but a mind that bent Empire's bones to purpose. Execute the contingency, she declared, her voice ringing clear, publicly. Let the Synod feeds carry it. The throne stands with our Terran guarantor. Barak, oversee the reroutes yourself. Fail, and answer why. The noble's crest drooped, but he bowed, the weight of her prerogative crushing dissent. Whispers chased Narine as he moved, queries spiking across data nets, Selenth scholars already dissecting Terran fieldcraft, their awe laced with unease. How did a soft-skinned newcomer see fractures in their flawless designs? Hours blurred into fortified vigil. Narine worked alongside Selenth engineers, his hands steady on conduits, multitasking diagnostics, overrides and casual translation of tactical slang that drew hesitant laughs from the crew, like rigging a fishing net for sharks. He quipped to a wide-eyed technician, whose crest perked in shared understanding. Lysera watched from the command dais, her formal mask cracking with a private thrill, their eyes meeting across the hum of preparation, a thread of trust pulling taut. Then the palace shuddered, alarms wailed, crimson strobes painting the bays in bloodlight. Breach at auxiliary dock! Sabotage confirmed, a watch officer barked, hatches buckled under shaped charges. Proxy Marines poured through, their Concord-marked armor gleaming, pulse rifles spitting azure fury. Narine was there in seconds, barking orders to the mixed detachment rallying at his side, Selenth guards with their resonant blades, humans from the Terran escort clutching multi-tools. Feed lines hot, funnel 'em left, choke point gamma, shock the vanguard. His voice cut the chaos, calm as a drill sergeant on familiar ground. A Marine lunged, Narine sidestepped, repurposed baton crackling from a severed feed line, dropping the intruder in twitching silence. Endurance burned in his veins. No fatigue, just focus, juggling fire teams while scanning for saboteur signals amid the din. From the command nexus, Lysera orchestrated the tandem strike, her fingers dancing over holoscreens. Divert auxiliary power, flood sectors 4 through 7. She commanded, syncing Narin's grids with armada drones swarming from hidden bays. Their minds meshed without words, his improvised traps herding foes into kill boxes, her imperial precision sealing escapes. A Selenth guard faltered, crest dimming under fire. Narin hauled him up, pack instinct overriding protocol. On your feet. We hold together. The guard's eyes widened, veins flaring gratitude. Borders faltered as grids ignited, exosuits shorting in electric storms. Screams echoing through breached vents. Narine pressed, his team a blur of human grit and Selenth fury, repulsing the last wave back into vacuum. Silence fell, acrid smoke curling, the palace secure. Lysera descended amid the cheers, her gown, unstained, crest high and radiant. She gripped Narine's arm, filial, electric, before the assembled ranks. Narine Krev of Terra, she proclaimed, voice amplified across Synod channels. You are hereby Shield of the Crown, sworn protector of Thalcor blood and throne. Medals gleamed as she fastened them. Nobles gasped, Varak's faction erupting in backlash hollow petitions. A human elevated? Precedent shattered, yet military crests rose in unity, officers murmuring of the impossible, a lone Terran's contingency turning rout to triumph. Lysera met their stares unflinching, her choice rippling outward, noble houses dividing, but legions binding tighter. In the strategy vault that followed, she sealed her gambit, initiate full inquiry into the sanctioning Concord, trace their proxies, expose the puppeteers. Pausing, she keyed a secure line to Terran command. Ambassador Hale, this is Empress Lysera. Your operative has earned our steel. Request limited counsel. Joint response protocols. Risk censure? Let them come. Naryn stood at her shoulder, wounds forgotten, as replies pinged. Terran affirmatives laced with quiet pride. Advisors hovered, but her gaze lingered on him, propriety fracturing into something warmer. The human's humility masked a galaxy-altering force. She who bent worlds found herself yielding ground. Whispers persisted. Selenth nets alight with human lore. Endurance tales from their wars, ingenuity from their labs. Respect bloomed, mutual, as Varric himself approached crest low.
Shield Krev, teach me that grid route for the Empire.
Outside, proxy fleets massed, but within, alliance hardened, not as fragile treaty but forged bond. Lysera felt it. When walls breached next, they would stand not alone, but entwined. Explosions tore through the orbital lattice, crimson lances piercing the throne world's vaunted shields like thorns through silk. Empress Lysera gripped the armrests of her command dais, the palace shuddering as secondary blasts rippled the air. Holographic readouts fracturing into static-laced warnings. Breach confirmed, her fleet admiral rasped, frills flaring in panic. Sanctioning Empire proxies. 3 dreadnoughts. Vectors locked on the palace spire. Lysera's crest pulsed steady violet, her voice a blade of imperial steel. Divert all lance batteries. Hold the line, but the shields flickered. Failing at key nodes she knew had been triple verified hours ago. Betrayal's scent hung thick, sharper than the ozone of ruptured plasma. Naryn Krev moved like a shadow through the chaos of the defense nexus, his Terran frame unyielding amid the Selenth officers' frantic gill flutters and crest flares. Consoles sparked around him as he patched into the shield grid, fingers dancing across alien interfaces he'd mastered in weeks of quiet study. Admiral, reroute auxiliary power from the eastern arrays. Now, he directed, voice calm, eyes scanning 3 feeds at once. Incoming vectors, shield diagnostics and personnel logs. No fatigue in his stance, no tremor despite the hours already logged since dawn briefings. The Admiral hesitated, frills quivering. Human, this is Selent code. Trust the pattern. Naryn cut in, pulling up a subroutine trace. His mind linked disparate threads. Power drain anomalies matching access timestamps from Minister Varroc's terminal. Shields weren't overwhelmed. They were rewritten. Varroc's signet. 3 accesses in the last cycle. He's the breach key. Gasps rippled through the nexus. A junior tech's crest blanched bone white. Impossible. The minister is bloodline vetted. Naryn didn't argue. He multitasked the lockdown, sealing Varroc's wing, boosting failing emitters with improvised relays from Terran field kits. Humans called it endurance. To him, it was just the job. Alarms wailed as the first proxy fighter swarm dove toward the palace area. Lysera strode into the nexus, her robes whispering authority over the din, Naryn at her flank like an unspoken shield. The council feed bloomed on the central hololith. 7 crests arrayed in holographic severity, led by High Justicar Thorn. Empress, Thorn intoned, his frills rigid with formality cracking at the edges. The breach exposes weakness. Execute Varroc publicly. Placate the sanctioners before they glass the spire. Yield defense command to the council. Protocol demands it. Lysera's gaze swept them, unyielding, her crest burned imperial gold. Yield to shadows and ultimatums? Varroc answers to me, not your expedience. I retain direct command of defenses and the legal right. Mobilize the armada. Vectors to my mark. She severed the feed with a gesture, turning to Naryn as the palace trembled again. Your assessment? Internal sabotage confirmed, he said, pulling up the trace for her. Varroc fed them the shield cipher, but the breach is narrow. 2-stage fix. Terran swarm tactics to clog their thrust, then your psychic electro-pulses to fry their cores. I've synced the protocols. Her frills stilled, appraising him, not as alien novelty, but as the steady force who'd seen the pattern where her own had blinked. Selent minds excelled at fleet harmonics, psychic weaves binding ships in unison. Humans, they improvised chaos into blades. Authorize, she commanded, her voice layering personal steel over regal decree. Direct the fleet vector. Nadir intercept, full lance. Nari nodded. No boast, just action. He orchestrated from the Nexus heart. Terran-inspired drone swarms launched from palace bays, weaving erratic patterns that baffled Selent rote formations, but shredded the proxy vanguard. Fighters danced in unpredictable phalanxes, human multitasking distilled into code he'd adapted overnight, drawing fire while Selent lancers charged psychic capacities. Lysera synchronized the pulse from her dais, her mind threading electro-essences across the armada. Ignite. Violet arcs leaped from her fleet, merging with Naren's drone webs to overload enemy shields. Proxies crumpled, hulls venting plasma in silent blooms, the breach sealed with a final shuddering clap of atmosphere. In the aftermath, Barak was dragged to the judgment hall, his crest ashen, confessions spilling under truthweave. Coerced, he choked. Sanctioners held my clutch sibs. Lower aides wept, their roles minor threads in his web. Lysera stood before the assembled court, Nareen at her side. The Senate feeds live across the empire. The architect falls, she declared, her blade severing Varrock's life thread in ritual precision. But mercy tempers justice, the coerced live, bound to service. Cheers erupted, crests flaring in unified gold. The sanctioners' remnants fled, their strike shattered. She turned to Naren, her gaze locking with his, formal propriety fracturing into something raw, entwined. Terran, you have proven beyond guard's oath. I confer permanent joint command. Before this court, I present you, Nareen Krev, my recognized consort protector. Gasps turned to murmurs of awe. A human, elevated not by birthright, but by deed. The Senate ratified in a cascade of affirmatives, the treaty sealed not as fragile parchment, but ironclad union. Lysera felt the shift, her rule once solitary crest amid stars, now doubled. In the quiet reform chamber that followed, Lysera unrolled the succession edict. Meritocratic council henceforth, no bloodline alone dictates the throne. Advisors risen by deed as you have. Her frill brushed his hand, a Selent intimacy aliens envied for its subtlety. Nareen inclined his head, humble as ever. And I'll balance martial council with court dignity, your armada's might, Terran edge. Together. No arrogance, just the quiet competence that had upended her world. He'd juggled breach codes, fleet sinks, and her own veiled doubts without falter, his resilience a human constant she'd come to crave. Counselors watched, crests subtly shifting from dismissal to wonder. He reads our weaves like birthken, one whispered, and bends them anew. Thorn's frills softened. The human
Connects what we segment.
Lysera's crest warmed at Naren's side. Proxy fleets still massed beyond the lattice, but the throne stood firm. She was born to rule, and learned that true power was finding an equal.